Welcome to another episode here of the Team Playbook. We got Joe here, who is with Green Spot. Hi, Joe. Thanks for joining us. I guess we'll start with just a little bit of background, sort of just introduce yourself and kind of let us know what you do and some of your own personal background as well.
Sounds good. Thanks, Carl, for having me on. My name is Joe DeSimone. I'm the Chief Operating Officer of Green Spot. Been with the company now for about 4.5 years, developing EV infrastructure in the public and private sector. Previously, I was heading up the operation and the team at City Bike, which is the public bike share in New York City. And kind of had a long career in operations, and happened to be on. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, that's great. So the EV charging. So I'm curious. I mean, as far as I know about that, I mean, what what's the best approach that your business is sort of taking in implementing this? Is it that you have this overhead company and so they kind of just work with them to install at like big properties, where there's going to be lots of cars? What's sort of the focus and the challenges that you guys sort of deal with in this market?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, Green Spot's in business to distribute electricity to EVs. So, the first thing we're obviously looking for is land in order to develop infrastructure. We focus first on really the site host or, the person that owns the property, and we're targeting specific types based on where we believe that people need the infrastructure, where the EVs will be and where the population supports it. That can be anywhere from a more captive audience, like a residential situation, like apartments or condos. It also could be more corridor based or destination based, say like a retail center, like a mall, or a strip retail center. But the challenges are wide ranging. In everything from getting enough, power, which seems to be a pretty common topic in many different industries now, including data center and AI, and different things that also support what we're doing because it's also a cloud-based business. Everything from that to the way that you're structuring the business model, what the site host wants out of the situation, what we prefer to do as we're primarily investing our own capital. So there's lots that goes into the locations that we're selecting and then how we're developing the infrastructure.
And it seems like such a massive growing market right now too, because of EVs becoming that much more prominent as sort of Americans and we begin to sort of accept this transition over to EV. So how do you see that scaling for you guys in your business and how your business is going to change in the next 2 years?
Yeah, I mean, everything kind of changes, of course, with the political environment. So, not to get too deep into that, but things, shift back and forth. There's
Hmm.
there's growth and there's stabilization periods. Right now, we're much more in a stabilization period where there was, sort of aggressive growth up to where we are today, and now we're at the point
Hmm.
where, things are starting to kind of become, much more parallel and not growing as aggressively. So, there's different ways to kind of think about the approach and, what we're doing during these times versus times when, EV adoptions are growing much faster. But EVs don't seem to be going anywhere, although, you do see some shifts in what the OEMs are doing in terms of, who's making EVs, who's starting up new programs, who's canceling
Hmm.
programs. So it's just kind of keeping an eye on that. But ultimately, I think, especially with the resale market, once more EVs are turned over into, second and third ownership, over time, I think we'll continue to see a growth there. And, I think once you own and operate an EV, you kind of never go back. You
Hmm.
see kind of what the benefits are, being able to charge at home or not really having high maintenance expenses and that sort of thing. So there's lots of benefits, of course, to EVs. But we kind of see the statewide programs that have kind of the waterfall approach in like 2030 and 2035. really being the target, so it's making it to that point, and then, we would expect to see large growth from there because a lot of the states will require EVs to be sold instead of gas vehicles.
Hmm. What would you say is I mean, what the most difficult, the biggest pain point in your business industry right now that you're working to overcome? How you guys are working to overcome that? What advice you may have? Any successes or failures that you've seen with that?
Yeah, I would say the biggest pain point right now is picking the right locations. Not all real estate is created equal, and there's not one proven approach to be able to, pick out a piece of
Hmm.
property and say, like, this location, if you build it, they will come. That's not always the case. It's not an exact science. So, we spend a lot of time focusing on, what data points are we looking at? Why are we looking at them? What creates a successful site? What's unsuccessful? But I mean, really, when it goes back to it, especially now with lower EV adoption rates, we're seeing more successful sites, especially if you look at the commercial side around areas that have, of course, higher traffic. You can sort of assume that there's going to be a higher percentage of EVs that are traveling, nearby that location.
Hmm.
Demographics come into play when you're looking at these sites as well. Multifamily is different because, that type of real estate, you have, of course, a more captive audience. But of course, the business models vary within those areas. So it's being able to, offer the residents, whether they own or rent that piece of property, the right solution for their needs. Renters,
Hmm.
obviously, it's much more short term.
Hmm.
Condo owner wants a more long term solution. So how do you be creative in those types of environments and offer the best thing for the people?
Hmm. One thing, I mean, it's sort of parallel to it. Like I always thought was interesting. There's no I guess the rival that you're dealing with is people's homes having their own charger at home, and then you're trying to solve that solution, I guess, in between, whether again renters in condos, units, stuff like in those parking lots. Um, but I always thought gas stations themselves, they don't make money off of the gas, right? They make money off people going in their store and buying a crazy expensive candy bar and stuff like that. So I've always thought, especially with this, I mean, you see like the Tesla diner, what they're doing is like kind of a gimmicky thing, but is that a trend that you see that could happen in this world that you guys are in now, or what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, you see a lot more, especially fast EV charging, which is more corridor and destination based, meaning you're either going to pass by that location or you're going to go somewhere where that, charging exists. There's always going to be, some amenity driving it there. You're kind of seeing a lot more, let's say, like gas stations, like you mentioned, starting to move in the EV direction. You'll see a lot of this in Europe and in the Middle East, much more prevalent because the gas stations have already seen, say, 25+% EV adoption rates, which is,
Hmm.
sort of like 3 or 4 times more than what the US is seeing. So it makes more sense to them. We're starting to see the gas station shift in the US. Tesla's already, installing at Sheetz as an example, which is a big gas station chain, and
Yeah,
Wawa as well. Wawa is a big one for them.
yeah.
So you'll start to see more of them go in that direction because ultimately, like you said, yes, I mean, the gas station may want to invest in that infrastructure, but they're going to make a very small amount off electricity. They know they're going to make much more off the longer dwell time. So if you're at a gas pump, you're spending like,
Yeah.
a couple minutes there, right? You
Hmm.
may or may not, most likely you probably don't go into the C-store. But if you're sitting in your car, EV charging, you're going to be there for at least like 20, 30 minutes. You're there's data that shows that those types of drivers spend like, 2 or 3 times more than the
Hmm.
typical gas vehicle.
Hmm.
And also kind of going back to the demographics and that sort of thing, also they have, potentially more money to spend on that sort of thing. So it could be very lucrative for that
Hmm.
type of real estate.
Hmm.
And we're kind of seeing that trend change over time. So, yeah, I mean, the amenity plays a big role. It's not always the case, but it is a big driving factor. If you're in like a strip mall that has no large anchor store, Then you look at next door and there's a large anchor store with a
Hmm.
much larger parking lot, and you have EV charging at both that are equal, then you're going to see correlation to sort of what's there to drive the traffic, compared to the other real estate.
That's great. Yeah, I mean, I've always thought that this whole industry too is really interesting because it is so new and there's so many. It's very fluid on where it could actually end up. I feel like obviously as EVs become a thing, but also how that whole industry is changing on its own. Government regulators, new laws out
Yeah.
there. How OEMs, pivot, right? Talk about what GM, and then there's other startups, right, doing the hybrid model. So it's always been
Hmm.
like it seems like you constantly have to evolve or change with because you're periphery of this overall industry.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
with you know with how you guys are, I guess, operating now, like what is something. Well, actually, let me transition to this. Because I do a lot of consulting with AI.
Hmm.
How are you guys implementing this in your business to become more efficient and scale on what you're currently doing?
Yeah, I mean, it really starts with like the really central management system, like the software that's operating the network. A lot of that is being developed in parallel with AI, systems to help things like, as an example, doing dynamic pricing that can detect, when, on a per location basis or on a per
Yeah.
charger basis, like when people are going to be there, in adjusting the price up and down to drive demand. Lower the price when there's less, people there to try to drive traffic to that location at times during the day when you have low utilization. So AI plays a big role there in pricing because it's quite complicated and it's not,
Hmm.
as elastic as you think it might be.
Yeah.
And then the other side that AI really is driving today is the customer support side. So providing, drivers with both chat and, sort of over the phone and email support via AI is something that's widely becoming the norm nowadays, because there's lots of tools that do it really well and provide a better overall experience where that AI system can still have access to your back end. They can still help integrate payment information as needed and help drivers with troubleshooting problems that they have. So we're seeing AI really kind of like spearhead in that direction.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, there's so many different tools and coming out every single day now too.
Yeah.
And again, that's a lot what I do is just like identifying a lot of specifically in real estate brokers in that world, um, identifying where a new process could be put in place that can make
Hmm.
your business more efficient. So you can work on your business, the famous saying, you work on your business, not in your business, right? So you can take
Right.
you out of that a little bit and take that off your plate. Um, with GreenSpot, I mean, in the next, if you could wave a magic wand today, like what would be the thing that you would just want to like, hey, get this fixed or get this done, so then we can move on to the next. Like, what's that crux that you guys sort of deal with right now?
I mean, the other thing we haven't really talked about is the unit economics of the utility, right? So
Yeah,
the electricity cost can, make or break a location. Not just within like you'll have multiple sites in a tariff area in New Jersey as an example, and they, perform all differently based on how much electricity you're selling or what tariff you end up on because of the type of infrastructure that you've installed.
yeah,
And then from area to area it changes. So I think, we see new tariff programs being developed specifically to kind of offset the sort of the fixed cost and the demand fees that we're experiencing. Other parallel industries like I mentioned, data centers and AI, both cloud-based systems, both experience the same challenges. So you'll see new technologies coming about, which is people are doing much more or looking for real estate in land where you can install battery energy storage systems, as an example, oftentimes supported by solar, to help again decrease your demand and your utility expenses. But also the use of AI can help you do that as well, both in trying to predict when those peaks will occur, because they're fairly predictable if you know what the
Hmm.
utility company is looking for, and then you can set up the equipment to help again reduce your expenses over time. AI allows you to take a more proactive approach. It's just, a lot of that's not developed yet. So it's kind of looking for, when are those solutions becoming available? What can you try to do in the meantime? But new hardware and technology solutions exist. It's just, again, finding the real estate and the right approach to use it.
Yeah, I mean, I imagine that's identifying where I guess you're gonna be putting these in this. That to me always seems like that's probably going to be the biggest challenge because you obviously
Yeah,
you need the customer there, you need the person there to use it,
yeah,
and they got to have the vehicle for it.
yeah.
I wonder if there's like, is there a way that you guys can that you're able to get that data to determine, oh, this is, how, like that research that you do. I'm just curious about how you guys would go about that and how you go about selecting a certain, okay, this is where we should put this spot in, or like, or and then I guess also with the real estate itself, are you guys going and purchasing this real estate? You just partnering there? Like, I guess, what's the best approach that you guys like to take?
Yeah, and like, besides the utility, the site selection is the most challenging. And that oftentimes, it unfortunately becomes your like secret sauce,
Yeah,
that everyone kind of has their own, formulaic, approach to how do we do
yeah.
this. But there are systems that people have developed. I mean, give some shout outs to like, we don't necessarily use them, but like we have experience with them. There's a company called EVPin that is developing sort of like a more systematic approach to site selection. There's one called like Stable Auto, which kind of integrates lots of data, traffic, demographics, foot traffic. There's lots of things that you can look at, but it's a combination of things. You're ultimately trying to like predict where right now there's enough EV adoption, to support the infrastructure, but
Hmm.
also what might be that EV adoption in the future. When you're looking like 5, 10 years out, because especially when you're like investing, in the real estate types we're looking for, most often we're, sort of renting that space. Similar to like if you're familiar with like the solar PPA agreements, they're
Hmm.
long-term agreements where the solar companies typically are investing the capital in the infrastructure, and then the owner typically gets the added benefit of, taking like a piece or reducing their electricity cost. The solar company usually takes a small piece of the savings there, right? And that's how they support the investment. But those you're usually looking like 20 years out on those types of agreements.
Yeah.
We're doing something very similar in the EV side. The only difference there is that um, on the solar side you have the sun. The sun's out. You can predict kind of what the solar generation is going to be at a particular
Hmm.
site based on how many panels there are and where you're located in the country and that sort of thing. The EV side is much more unpredictable, so it's riskier. However, the upside is can be high if you pick right. So it's also using a lot of machine learning to kind of feed data back into the system and look at your historicals and kind of see what went right and where do we want to focus going forward.
Hmm. Well, that's great. Well, we're gonna start wrapping up here. I guess so. You're in this growing industry, this growing business. I guess what's one big piece of advice you'd give, business leaders that are sort of in your shoes right now in this, you know, growing, constantly changing sort of world that you're in?
Yeah, I mean, I can say that it's certainly not easy, but it's worthwhile and rewarding. You're developing infrastructure that people need. Whether or not it seems like they do. Hopefully in the near future, you'll be able to offer something that people will love and they'll utilize a lot. So that piece of it is, not it's rewarding, but it's not always the easiest to do. The piece of advice I would give people is just to, um, try to instead of kind of focusing on growth and scale, potentially it might be better to kind of fine tune and to be more selective, where you're installing and why you're installing there.
Hmm.
I think you can do a lot more and you can spread yourself, over a longer period of time, rather than trying to do too much too soon. So that's kind of like the sort of the trend that we're seeing in the short term. Where I think if you look like 3 to 5 years ago, things were exploding and it was just a matter of like installing everywhere possible that you could install. Now I think it's, taking a much more systematic approach and being more careful, I think will get you a lot further.
Hmm. Yeah, I actually was given very similar advice for previous podcasts where it's like you focus in on your certain niche that you really want to go, and
Yeah,
like don't overextend yourself in this in a certain area. And I mean it's so applicable in so many industries and wherever you want to do it. It's like you need what you're good at, right? Focus in on that and only do that. Don't try and get distracted,
yeah.
and then otherwise you're gonna overextend and spend too much money. And it's, just, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, that
exactly.
makes
Just pick one thing, get really good at it,
yeah.
and maybe pick things that are parallel to it. Like a lot of companies have pivoted recently, they're focusing more on like fleet charging or, they're only going after office buildings, so there's all sorts of different ways to do it.
Hmm.
But I think kind of when you kind of take a step back, especially during these times of like more stabilization than growth, I think, it's even more important to do so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's great. Well, thanks for sharing, learning a little bit here about Green Spot and what you guys are doing, how you guys operate, what your growth plans, and hopefully you guys got an EV. We got someone for you, right? Where are you guys
Absolutely.
predominantly? Where do you guys predominantly based where all your
Yeah, I
chargers?
mean we're in the New York City metro area, Jersey City right outside of the, Manhattan, and we do primarily infrastructure in the Northeast. However, we're in like 30 states in the US, and
Okay,
capabilities all, as far as California and far south is like Texas and Florida. So, we're pretty much all over the place, but if you're in New Jersey, or New York, we'd love to talk to you, and help you out any way that we can.
yeah. How can one of our listeners get in touch with you guys if they're interested in installing any chargers?
Yeah, I mean, of course, they can go to our website, greenspot.com. They can also shoot us an email, info@greenspot.com as well. I'll see that email. And like I said, I mean, we're talking to new property owners all the time. And we usually can find something that works for both of us.
Perfect. All right. Well, thank you, Joe.
Thank you, Carl. I appreciate you
Yeah.
having me on.
All right. That was another episode here of the Team Playbook.